Welcome back, Epic 7 fam. Pat here to talk about another first impressions video, and in this one we talk about not one, not two, but all 9 of the characters that were shown on today, August 4th, 2021's live stream. So yeah, there's quite a lot of things shown. So this is going to be a quick lowdown on how I feel about the character stats, skills, my initial impressions, do I think they're worth pulling, and all of those sorts of questions. We will not be going anywhere near as in-depth as the how to play video series or even as in-depth as the Straze first impressions video because there is a lot of things to cover. So let's not waste a ton of time and let's start talking about the ReZero collab characters first. The first character to talk about is the heroine of ReZero, Emilia. She is voiced by Rie Takahashi, who you may know from anime such as Konosuba. She voices Megumi in there, and she's also Mashu Kirilight from the gacha game Fate Grand Order, not to be confused with the Mashu that you may know from Epic 7. She is an Ice Soul Weaver of the Gemini zodiac symbol, which means she shares a stat line with Diane. And throughout this review and first impressions, we'll be comparing her to Diane a lot, and that's because her primary role seems to be that of a cleanser and a support, although she does have some really nice applications as potentially, part of a cleave team. So we'll talk about the skills in a second. The thing to note about her being DN's stat line is it gives us a good picture of where we can expect her stats to land and how to build her. She's most likely going to want to be on 1500 defense with an HP somewhere between 16k and 20k. If we are trying to use her as a cleanser, we most likely are going to need her at 150 effect resistance to 200 effect resistance. The most difficult thing when trying to gear DN was to get her effect resistance high while maintaining a good amount of bulk and speed. Thankfully, Emilia has an effect resistance imprint, which is basically a godsend. I would rather have this over the health percentage any day of the week. So pulling extra copies of Emilia feels really, really strong and really, really impactful. And because of how people build DN, we can basically infer that she is going to probably end up somewhere between 230 and 260 speed based on your gear quality, 260 being the absolute high end for, people who have insane gear. But yeah, she'll probably be somewhere in that range for speed when we try to build her. Taking a look at her actual skills, her S3 is Divine Protection of the Great Spirit. I'm going to assume that this is when she summons Puck. She basically dispels 2 buffs from all allies before healing them and granting them a barrier for 2 turns. The strength of the heal and the barrier I do not currently know because we don't know the numbers. We'll have to wait for pretty much everything I talk about, the data mine numbers, tomorrow or whenever we get them. So yeah, overall though, really good skill. A heal and a barrier is really nice. Usually when we talk about cleanses are usually a cleanse plus a heal. This is a cleanse plus a heal plus a barrier. Yes, it's not a full cleanse, but 2 debuffs is enough to get rid of most problematic things. Most obnoxious openers or debuffers give 2 debuffs. So this is a really excellent S3. I know it seems kind of boring because there are a lot of characters that do this, but it is still very powerful. And because it has that barrier on top of the heal, I feel like it gives it a slight leg up compared to similar S3s from RGB 5-star Soul Weavers. Taking a look at her second skill, it is Spirit's Blessing. She dispels 2 buffs from the target ally before giving them attack buff for 2 turns and increasing their combat readiness between 40 and 50%, and also increases Emilia's combat readiness by 25%. If you soul burn it for 10 souls, it also recovers health. This move is ridiculous. It is not only a pseudo cleanse, but it also is a buff and a CR push. This is essentially Flan's S2 before it got the buff, but it has a potential heal and a cleanse staple to it. So Emilia not only functions as a cleanser, but she can be used as a support for either a cleave team or even a bruiser team. You can use it to push up a slower character like a counter Landy right to the front and start unloading that S3 immediately. So this is again another really good skill. And these 2 skills alone, just the S2 and the S3, should tell you that Emilia is very powerful. Because we know that DN can be played at 250 speed plus in the higher tiers of RTA, this character can function as a tankier, more sustain-oriented version of Flan. So yeah, this is a really powerful character that will have a lot of applications. I see a lot of people online saying Emilia and a lot of these other characters shown today were very underwhelming. I personally think Emilia is going to be very impactful in the metagame, and I do think that this is a must-pull character. You should always pull for limited characters in general. But these two skills alone, I think, solidify Emilia as a good character that you should be trying to get extra copies of for that imprint. Emilia's S1 is Huma. It's pretty much a standard Soul Weaver S1. It heals the person on your team with the lowest amount of health by some amount, probably between 10 and 15% of Emilia's max health. Not much to say, pretty much standard S1. And then when we take a look at her artifact, I do think it is quite good. It is Guardian Ice Crystals. It increases the wearer's effect resistance by 15%, and when an ally is attacked and their health is 50% or less, it recovers 10 to 20% of their max HP, can only be activated once per turn. So the reason why I think this is a good artifact is that it is very akin to Water's Origin for the whole team, except for the person wearing it. A common team that DN is featured in is with DN and Ruel. That level of protection is very difficult to punch through. And having Emilia instead of DN in the slot, while having Ruel on Water's Origin, will make it incredibly difficult to kill your Ruel or pretty much anyone else on your team. Yes, it doesn't have the combat readiness like Water's Origin does, but it does protect the other 3 people on your team and is a very good source of damage mitigation. I am definitely going to be pulling a lot on the Emilia banner because I do think her imprint is worth it, and I do think Guardian Ice Crystals is the better of the 2 5-star gotcha artifacts that we end up getting, assuming that obviously these are split banners. I'm assuming that Emilia plus her artifact is on a different banner than Rem plus their artifact. If they're on the same, then sorry, I didn't really check ahead of time. But yeah, again, definitely worth picking up multiple copies of this and multiple copies of Emilia. Again, to summarize, I think Emilia is a must pull and will for sure see play. The next character to talk about is my personal favorite character from ReZero, and that is Rem. She is voiced by Inori Manase, who you may recognize as Hestia from the Danmachi series or the gacha game by the same exact name. So, she is a ice warrior of the Scorpio zodiac symbol, which thankfully is actually good on warriors. She doesn't share a stat line with anyone else in this game, but traditionally I hate Scorpio zodiac signs, and we'll talk about that at the end of this video. She has 1,208 attack, which is above average, 6,488 health, which is also above average, 102 speed, which is quite slow, but it doesn't matter. When we take a look at the kit, you'll understand why. 616 defense, which is quite good, 15 crit chance, 150 critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. The most important thing to note about her imprints is that she has critical hit chance as her concentration, which is amazing. Honestly, we'll talk about the skills in a second, but I feel like Smilegate and Super Creative must know that Rem was Miss Anime 2016, Miss I Print Money. She's very, very popular, rakes in tons of cash. So I feel like they really juiced this character. There are no bad stats in this stat line, like, whatsoever. This is an excellent stat line for a warrior. It's pretty much above average in everything except for speed. And honestly, if you're going to build her on a counter set, which I think you probably will when we take a look at the kit, the speed doesn't matter. There's not really any drawbacks here besides low speed and lack of effect resistance and, low effectiveness. And the kit solves all of those. So let's first talk about her S2 because it's so ridiculous that I had to read it multiple times to, really be sure that this is exactly what this does. So her S2 is a Maid's Pride. When somebody dies, whether that is an ally or an enemy, it dispels all debuffs from Rem and grants her Demon Mode for 2 turns. Can only be activated once every 5 turns. When an ally except for Rem is attacked, so basically if your opponent AoEs, there's a 15 to 20% chance based on Malagora to activate Iron Strike. So let's look at the actual modes themselves. Demon Mode is you are immune to debuffs and you ignore effect resistance for all of your opponents when attacking. Additionally, it can't be dispelled. So basically, you're just going to get rid of all the debuffs. You're not going to be able to be hit by any debuffs. So already this character is a nightmare for control teams, and you don't need effect resistance, which is one of the only drawbacks that the stat line has. And then she ignores effect resistance while attacking, which means you don't need effectiveness. So the only drawback right now is that you have low speed for the character's stat line. Additionally, when she basically has a built-in counter, so you don't need to be fast. This Iron Strike attacks all enemies before decreasing buff durations on them by 1 turn and making them unhealable by 1 turn. So we've only done the S2, and already you can tell this character can is almost guaranteed to land debuffs, assuming they don't get 15%. She can't be debuffed really that well. She has an AoE counter attack that's also functions as a strip and gives unhealable. This character already off to a ridiculously strong start. This is one of the best passive skills I've ever seen on a character in the game. Then we have her S3, which is I Will Punish You. It increases her attack for 3 turns before she does the damage. So already this character has a 3-turn, not even a 2-turn, a 3-turn attack buff before she actually attacks. And this is on a 4 to 5 turn cooldown, by the way. And then she attacks all enemies and decreases their hit chance. So it blinds them for 2 turns with what is it, say 50% chance? No, it's 100% chance. I'm sorry. And then on top of that, if it wasn't enough, it increases her combat readiness by 15%. This is a really loaded skill, especially when you consider that, again, a Maid's Pride makes it so that the blind is pretty much going to hit for sure. Already we're bordering on a ridiculous character with just those 2 skills. And then when we take a look at the S1, it's Leave It to Me. She attacks an enemy with a 35 to 50% chance to defense break for 2 turns based on Malagoras. And if she's in demon mode, she does it again. And then the Soul Burn increases the effect chance to 100%. So if you Soul Burn this character when you are in demon mode, you are almost guaranteed a defense break on any target, assuming it doesn't get 15%ed. And then you just attack them again. It's basically like Alencia S1 into S2 with the defense break into trample, and but you can't resist it. Like that's just ridiculous. The character just feels very strong. Like this feels like, again, another must pull unit. Blue is really, really hurting right now for good damage dealers, and I think the message was sent loud and clear to Smilegate that Blue Kisei wasn't enough. Her poor back is just really hurting her from just carrying the color, and they just delivered with Rem. Rem just feels absolutely nuts, and just like Emilia, you're going to want to pull multiple copies because that critical hit chance, concentration, imprint is amazing. Crit hit chance is pretty much the best concentration imprint in the game. So yeah, there's nothing really else to say about Rem. She just feels ridiculously good. I can again almost assure you that this character will show up just because of how insanely strong the kit is and just how bad Blue as a color needs a win when it comes to damage dealers. I would definitely try to prioritize getting her as well. When we take a look at her artifact, it's Azure Comet. It increases Rem's critical hit chance by 15%, and when somebody dies, it increases her combat radius by 12 to 24% and can only be activated once per turn. I feel like this artifact is kind of like a trap. I really think because she has the critical hit chance, imprint concentration, you probably don't really need the crit hit chance from it. And then on top of that, the 12 to 24% isn't really enough. In some scenarios, like Designer Lilibet's, I believe 40% push, and that doesn't always end up being relevant, nor does it guarantee you a turn sometimes. So yeah, it just feels like a trap artifact. I personally would just try and build this character on a counter set, very akin to how you would build Robbie and just jam Sigurd Scythe on her. Because of the defense break that's guaranteed in demon mode, plus the additional effect, she's going to gain a lot of health from bursting somebody off of the Sigurd Scythe, plus the attack buff also helps in that sense. And if you are low on health and you trigger the S2 AoE attack, which is Iron Strike, you will end up healing quite a lot there as well. And then I Will Punish You, having the attack buff on top of it, means more damage there as well. Honestly, the only way I just don't see Rem being a slam dunk pick as just an amazing character overall is if her multipliers are just bad. She just seemed out of the box, right out of the gate, incredibly strong. Like, I don't want to say overtuned, but man, is this character just really, really, really good. The last character to talk about is the free-to-play character that everybody will be getting, which is Rem's twin sister, Ram. She is voiced by Ria Murakura, who is a VA that appears in quite a number of gacha games, including as Absinthe in Arknights, if you play that game. She is an Earth Mage of the Gemini zodiac symbol, which should look really familiar to you all, because it's Spectre Tenebria's stat line. Don't be fooled by the 1556 attack that is actually factoring in her S2 passive, but we are already off to a pretty decent start for a free-to-play character if they are giving you somebody with Spectre's stat line. Her imprint concentration is effectiveness, which is nice considering that her kit has a number of debuffs in it, so that is already good. I feel like overall, as just a general spoiler about what I think of the character, that she is a wonderful PvE addition to anyone's box, just like Soul Bad Guy. Soul Bad Guy feels more farming oriented, whereas Ram feels much better for handling more difficult PvE scenarios as well as some of the expeditions in the game. We'll start with her S2 passive, which is What Are You Looking At? It increases her attack by 30%, which is essentially like, having 3 stacks on a Spectre passive for those of you who are keeping score and trying to figure out how her stats will end up panning out. It's like having a Spectre at 3 stacks. Additionally, it reduces the effect of decreased combat readiness debuffs inflicted on Ram by 80 to 100% based on Malagoras. That decreased combat readiness debuff is really nice because it means you can play her in Hopeless Samaquas as your primary damage dealer if you are a free-to-play or a new player and do really well. The enemy will not be able to CR push back your Ram, and she'll just end up being stuck wherever she is with fatigue, which means that the amount of combat readiness that you need on a team for her to function is significantly less than using a character such as Baiken or Orvalan or any of the other number of green DPS that you would need. In fact, a awesome free-to-play team would be Helga, Auxiliary Lots, Ram, and Falcon Artillery. That team could very easily beat Hopeless Samaquas and get you some very high scores. I'm pretty sure it could actually get you the Dagger of Sakara score, high score for that achievement as well. So yeah, Ram already off to a pretty good start for players that are looking for that. When we take a look at her S3, it's El Fura, which is a single target attack that decreases the enemy's defense for 2 turns and gives her a greater attack buff for 2 turns. It's on a 4 to 5 turn cooldown based on Malagoras. So we'll have to see the multipliers on this thing, but if it's at least at 1.8 or better, like Spectre Tenebria's, this is really good. Having the greater attack buff means that this character is going to hit significantly harder. The S2, again, remember, is like a 3-stack Spectre passive, and then this giving the greater attack buff on top of that means that this character is going to hit for very high amounts of damage. That's why, again, I think she's amazing in Expedition, but because of her stat line, the fact that this has a defense break and a greater attack buff, and her base attack being so high due to the passive, she's probably going to be very great in Hall of Trials and Abyss. That Rage set that we talked about in the Spectre Tenebria video, probably going to be absolutely excellent on this character for a lot of PvE content. Her S1 is How Boring. It gives a 60 to 75% chance to decrease an enemy's attack for 1 turn, and if she has a buff that increases the effect chance by 25%, which means at Max Malagoras, it's going to be 100% chance to decrease attack. The Soulburn makes the move an AoE. Again, this is a pretty good S1 here. It will help you in a lot of PvE scenarios. The fact that she has a debuff on the S1 at all means that she's great, obviously, with Rage set for the reasons we talked about in the Spectre video. And then on top of that, it gives you some, padding and damage mitigation when it comes to Abyss and things like that. So a little bit of protection there. Again, seems like a very strong, hard content PvE character, and I'm glad that we get this character for free. I think that she will see a decent chunk of use just because, again, of how good she is in Hopeless Samaquas. Her artifact is Severed Horn Wand. It increases her attack by 15%, and when she's attacked by an elite or boss monster, it decreases the damage she takes by 10 to 20%, and it doesn't stack with some of the other damage reduction effects that you're probably pairing her with anyway. It's nice that they gave us a free artifact, but this ain't it, Chief. Just play something else on Ram. Alright, so let's quickly talk about the 5 3-star units that were shown today. As a disclaimer, because 3-stars have such horrible space stats, they probably will not make any impact on World Arena at all. So if you're trying to play any of these characters in RTA, this is not going to be it. Mirsa is the only one, I think, in history that has even come close to having some success in RTA. Maybe these might because of how good some of the passives are on these characters and the kits are on these characters. But let's just talk about the best aspects of each of the characters so that way, if they ever get a specialty change, you have them ready and you know which ones to hold on to. So let's talk about the fire one first, which is Melany. The best part about the character is the S2 agility. It has a damage reduction component to it, but it's RNG based. We don't really care about it. What makes Melany special and worth paying attention to is that she gets 15% combat readiness at the end of every turn. It's her turn, an ally's turn, an enemy's turn. This character is just going to be zipping, zooming, just taking all the turns. This is a really powerful passive, and if the character gets any buffs to the S1 or the S2, or just gets really good stats in general or passives from a rune tree, this character is going to be great, so keep that in mind. The next one to look at is the light one, which is Camilla. And I honestly think Camilla just is an incredibly well-rounded unit. And honestly, I wish she was a 5-star because this character's kit is actually great and very, completely realized. It is a complete character that functions very well. All of the moves have great synergy. It doesn't feel disjointed or broken out. Like it feels like it would be a good character. If this was a 5-star, I feel like this would be a very good character. So her S1 has a 50% chance to break the target's defense for 2 turns, which is obviously very good. But if she has an attack buff, it also triggers a dual attack from the ally with the highest attack. So this move is like basically an S2 from Adventure Roz. Her S1 is Adventure Roz's S2 as long as she has an attack buff. That's amazing. So then we look at her S2, Tactical Maneuver, which grants her a skill nullifier once, as well as an attack buff for 2 turns. And the ally on your team with the highest attack also gets an attack buff for 2 turns. And then it increases her combat readiness by 50%. So this is the perfect way to set up your S1. You're getting the skill nullify for protection, and you get the 50% CR push, so you don't feel like you're wasting your turn. You feel like you are putting up the buffs that you need in order to start going off with the S1, and you're not really losing much for it. You're getting some protection, and you're getting back into the fight really quickly. Very good S2. The S3 is Swift Execution, which when she hasn't used it yet, provides her with a 30% damage reduction. Those are very powerful. See characters like Little Queen Charlotte. See characters like Archdemon Shadow. This is a very strong passive to have. And then it becomes a single target nuke that does more damage the lower her health is. And if she kills somebody with it, she goes back up to max health. This is kind of like a mini Crowl, like blue Crowl attack. Like you just get to do damage to somebody and blow them up and then just get full healed for it, and then you get the damage reduction passive if you don't need to use it because you're not low on health. Yeah, this is a really good character. Again, I absolutely love Camilla, and I hope that this character gets a specialty change immediately as fast as possible. Also, important to note, her imprint is speed and her imprint concentration is crit chance. That's nuts. That's literally the total package. That's the best release and the best concentration on one character. So this character is nuts and might end up being the best one out of the entire set. The green one is Christy. She is an Earth Knight, and the best thing about her is her S2 passive, Oath Shield. She has a 15% to counter attack whenever she's attacked, and additionally, she gives 50% of her effect resistance to the person that is in the back row. So that means this character is kind of like a weird version of Troublemaker Crozet. Whoever is in the back line will have a very good chance of not being debuffed because she naturally has high effect resistance. You're going to build her with high effect resistance. So this is a really, really interesting way to protect an ally. I really, really like this character for this Oath Shield passive. So if you are looking for a role player that might just need to protect somebody against control, she might be an okay pick. You might be able to like 5th pick her in RTA. I really don't think you would because of the low stats, but maybe there is a character that if they just survive and don't get debuff versus control, you'll win, and you might be able to sneak this character through. And yeah, and that's largely because Oath Shield is a very good S2 passive. The next one to talk about is Penelope, which is the Dark Thief. And I think this is the one that a lot of people are really liking, largely because, really cool looking waifu. So yeah. This character's kit feels really disjointed and not really super cohesive like Camilla's does, so I'm not really a big fan of it, but it is an interesting kit nonetheless. All 3 moves have something that are worth talking about. The first one, S1 Merciless Sword, gives her a 15% attack buff whenever she uses it permanently for the rest of the fight, and it stacks up to 45%. And if she kills somebody with the S1, it increases her combat readiness by 75%. So this character has decent attack for a 3-star, and if they obviously get a huge attack buff in the future from a inevitable specialty change, then yeah, this character will do a lot of damage because 45 extra percentage attack is nuts. You only need to look at something like Remnant Violet on Shepherd of the Hollow to know that, extra percentage attack or damage outside of, the normal attack buff is usually pretty good. So again, a good S1. The S2 is Preliminary Plans. It decreases debuff durations of all allies by 1 turn before granting a barrier to the caster for 3 turns, as well as an extra attack. So it's your survivability move that you just throw out at the start of the fight. Just take the extra turn and then start attacking. to make her easier to survive with. But like the debuff durations just feels kind of tacked on, like they couldn't figure out what to do. The character doesn't natively have any effect resistance or any need for effect resistance, so I don't really know how good that was. Like I rather would have gotten like barrier plus attack buff, but we can't have everything. It is a 3-star. So yeah, this is an interesting skill, just one I don't think you should rely on that often. Like you'll use it for the barrier and the extra turn, but that debuff duration reduction, I don't really know about. And then they have some new design space here with the S3 disarm. It has a resource reduction effect on it, which means that if she attacks a character with fighting spirit or focus, it decreases them. So basically, if you attack like a Seaside Bologna at full focus, it'll get rid of their focus. A Remnant Violet gets rid of their focus. So yeah, that's a very interesting mechanic. Excuse me. And on top of that, it decreases the attack of the target for 2 turns, as well as a 100% chance to stun it for 1 turn, and then gives her stealth for 2 turns. Again, really, really interesting kit. There's a lot going on here, and she has like good speed. So I do think that this character will probably be decent as long as there is a specialty change for her in the future. It just, again, feels a little bit all over the place, just because, again, that S2 just feels very strange to me. And the last one to look at is Helen, who is an Ice Knight. And I really, really wish Helen was a 5-star, because this character's kit, all of it, is just nuts. I just hate that it's tied to a 91 speed 3-star. Like even Helen's base health is quite good for a 3-star. It's almost as good as a 5-star Knight's. And then she has 703 defense, which is actually very high. That puts her with, again, 5-star Knights, even better than some 5-star Knights. So yeah, this is not even a bad character with bad stat lines. And the kit's just great. I wish you were a 5-star. So her S1 is Blunt Strike. It gives 15% combat readiness to an ally on your team, except for the actual user. So you can't use Helen, but so it's just going to end up being somebody else. Because of her low speed and the fact that the S1, CR pushes the rest of the team, that already makes her a great candidate for a counter set. Her S2 is Wild Swing, which gives her a defense buff for 2 turns, as well as heals her. That's also really nice. Not amazing, but still a pretty good thing to have on a tank, especially one who has defense scaling moves like Helen does, and somebody with a good defensive score like Helen has. And then her S3, I think, is really bonkers. Sword of Grace. It has a 7-turn cooldown at max skill level. She gains the counterattack stance for 3 turns before granting increased speed and a barrier to all allies, except for the caster, for 2 turns. Barrier strength is proportional to her defense. Additionally, whenever she gets hit by an AoE attack, it decreases the skill cooldown by 2 turns. So you can kind of keep spamming this move as long as you're playing her into a team full of AoEs. This, like I said, it feels like a 5-star kit. Like, we have everything here. We have self-healing, we have defense buffs, we have CR push for the team, we have speed buff and barriers for the team. We have counter attack natively built into the kit, so we don't need to always go counter set, and we can kind of keep spamming those S1s. Like, this is a great anti-AoE character in the same vein as somebody like Last Rider Crow or ML Kawazu. Like, this is a good kit. I just hate that it's tied to a 3-star. So now let's talk about EEs, and the first of which we will talk about is Choux, which gives 10 speed. Man, did Choux get the biggest glow up ever when it comes to the EEs. 10 speed is amazing for her. She has crazy good defense stats, but just she's just a tad too slow. So giving her 10 speed puts her more in line with a lot of the other characters. It puts her more towards the middle of the pack and allows her to be a more competitive choice. So already off to a really good start. Then you look at EE number 1, which makes it so when her S1 has a critical hit, there's a 40% chance to activate her S2 Fwoosh. Fwoosh is literally the best part about the character. That move's also really fun to say. It defense pens and does a good chunk of damage and adds some survivability to Choux. The problem is that it's inconsistent because you kind of need to wait for it to get stacked so you can get the reset so you can keep using it. And in a lot of scenarios, it just makes Choux fall flat because she just doesn't have the ability to use Fwoosh as much as you need it to happen. So now with Chop on the EE granting you Fwoosh on top of it, you can play a counter Choux and it could function like a Charles and just ruin somebody's day, and it gives you more chances to proc the strongest part of her kit. And it actually means that she could be a solid answer to things like researcher carry. Like, people were hoping for better blue DPS, blue answers to things. And I think that EE #1 on Choux is just amazing, and it actually should bring her into some kind of meta relevance. She might not be the best character, but this is amazing. Like, when we talk about a character needing a good EE to be good, like, they need the EE. I always hear it for like Melany. If she just had an EE, she'd be great. Like, this is the great EE. This is an absolutely amazing EE. Just get the first one with 10 speed and you are good to go. The other two are nice, but I don't think they're anywhere near as good as the first one. The second one makes it so the S2 does more damage. Not bad, but certainly not anything to write home about. And then the S3 just gives you immunity for 2 turns to all allies when you use the S3. Again, nice, but you're mostly playing this character because of the S2, not really the S3. The crit damage reduction is nice, but again, you're playing her for S2. Then we look at Assassin Cartuja, who got effectiveness for his stat on his EE, which is really nice. This character is largely here to just introduce RNG as a factor to games, whether that is versus control or versus cleave. Other than that, his only other real role is to stun and defense break, and that's perfect for having more effectiveness. Taking a look at his EEs, I think the first two are really good. I probably would skip the third one. The first one increases his evasion chance by 5%. The passive, instead of giving, I think, 20 to everybody, it now gives 25 to everybody, which just means you get to add more RNG to the equation and make it even more difficult for your opponent to win the game when they're playing against Assassin Cartuja. The second one means that whenever he successfully evades, he increases the combat readiness of everyone other than him by 10%, which turns him into a small general Purgus. So yeah, again, there's nothing really bad about this one. Choose whichever one you like. I definitely think this will make him still be a niche pick, but he should be played more often as a niche pick. Like, I saw him like once every like eternity as something to mess with the math. But with this EE, he might show up and be a little bit more prevalent, a little bit more frequent in those matchups. I definitely really like this EE, though. I wish I had this character. I'm a day one player. I still have never pulled Assassin Cartuja. And the last EE to talk about is Kitty Clarissa. Effect resistance 16% is absolutely amazing because she's only ever played in 3 areas. She's either a cleanser in World Arena where she needs the ER. She is played as somebody for expeditions where we don't care what her stats are, or she's played in Hall of Trials where, again, we don't care what her stats are. So giving effect resistance is the perfect thing that she could have gotten here. Unfortunately, I don't really like any of the options on the EE. They're all decent, but I don't really feel like any of them really helps her in any of those 3 game modes that we already talked about. I most likely would probably just take the first one because it gives you some healing for expeditions. You're not going to play it in World Arena because you're most likely playing something Warhorn on her, and maybe you might play it in World Arena. I don't play Kitty Clarissa as a cleanser, but maybe you might like this. Restrict on the S2 feels really underwhelming because, yes, your S2 is basically a strip anyway, but you're most likely playing her with high effect res, very low effectiveness, so you might not end up getting a strip to begin with, and if you do, you kind of wish it was something other than restrict, right? Like, you'd rather have had blind, slow, defense break, even burn, so you could like synergize with like the broken burn characters. Now, I think you'd rather have had anything other than restrict. And then finally, decrease combat readiness of all enemies when you use the S2. I guess this is probably the one you'd go for just because it is a pushback and you will get DPS with it even if you have no effectiveness. So one other thing I want to talk about is that Judge Kisei is going to end up being the skin for World Arena this season, which is very strange to me for a number of reasons. Number one, traditionally the person that gets the skin, their base character already has a skin. So like Ruel, Destina has a skin already. Take Spectre Tenebria, Red Tenebria already has a skin. Fallen Cecilia, Red Cecilia has a skin. So this might be the first character that the ML5 version just ends up having the skin before the normal version, unless there's like a Kisei skin on the horizon very, very soon. And then more importantly than that, this character has no meta relevance. Like, nobody really plays Judge Kisei unless you're just trying to cleave in lower ranks because you just don't want to waste your time on Arena, or maybe you cleave Guild Wars. That's kind of it. There's not really any real reason. This is a very bottom barrel ML5. If you've watched any of my videos, you know my review of this character is scathing a lot. So I just take this as a sign that this character is getting reworked very, very soon, which is why I decided to include it in this video. All right, and now we can close out with the boy closer Charles, who is the next ML 5-star after Spectre Tenebria. And I gotta say, kind of underwhelmed with this guy. You know, I personally am probably not gonna roll for him, and that is largely because he is a dark thief of the Scorpio zodiac symbol, which means he shares a stat line with pretty much every 5-star thief that I hate building, because I really just don't like the Scorpio zodiac symbol. I'm just not a fan. So this zodiac symbol, if you guys have never watched my How to Play Selene video, has high attack, slightly above average speed, really good health, slightly above crit hit chance, you know, standard crit hit damage. The problem is the really terrible 473 defense, which means that unless you're willing to overcommit on having defense, the character's just going to always be made of paper. You can get 18 to 20k health on this stat line very easily, but you're going to get hit and killed like you're a character with only 12 to 13k health. So yeah, 473 is so low for a defensive score that you need flat defense to actually get defense stats on this character. Percentage is actually worse than just taking flat in a lot of scenarios. So yeah, not really a big fan of this stat line. You know, again, if you watched my Selene video, I just complain about how I wish I could change the stat line. So already I'm not off to a good start when he has arguably one of the worst stat lines I think you could have in the entire game. So let's take a look at his actual kit. His S2 is a passive called Closer. He's Closer Charles, and his role is to close out kills, so this is very fitting for him. Whenever an ally except for Charles attacks, if the enemy's health is less than 30%, it will increase Charles's combat readiness by 35 to 50% based on Malagoras, and it gives him the perception buff, which is what Green Violet gets for 2 turns. It can only be activated once every 2 turns. I don't really know why it's perception buff. I wish it was anything else. Hit buff, larger crit hit damage buff, attack buff. Perception just feels really weird. You're most likely going to be building this character with high critical hit chance anyway. You're probably going to end up getting him there. And if I recall, he has a crit hit chance concentration. So yeah, the crit hit chance buff on perception just feels kind of lackluster, not really needed. So you're just getting 15% crit hit damage out of it. So yeah, I think the main role of this is just to swing him back around to take an extra turn. And we'll take a look real quick now at his S3, which is Descent. He attacks all enemies. Unfortunately, he then gets the attack buff after, not before, but he does give the attack buff to all allies for 2 turns and then increases your whole team's combat readiness by 20%. It then gives him an evasion buff for 3 turns, which is something, but again, we know from Selene, who also has the same stat line with the evasion buff, you're still going to die even if you're built reasonably tanky. You might not need to go high damage on this character, so maybe you can go higher defense in that case, in which case then maybe the evasion buff ends up working out for him. Already, just looking at Descent plus Closer, this feels like a character that you're going to want to build incredibly fast, so you can use Descent as an opener to get an attack buff, as well as push forward the rest of your team. He feels very similar to a Faithless Litica because his speed stat is so similar, and he can function as an opener because of the CR push. And then after he gives the attack buff, pushes up the team, a damage dealer will go, chunk somebody low, Closer will trigger, he'll come rushing back to the front, which leads us to his S1 skill, Elimination. He basically is an S1 that cuts the enemy when used on the caster's turn. If the user has Perception, so if you've used the Closer passive like I just talked about, he will use Demolition instead. So Demolition is basically just the Charles S2 animation. The damage increases proportional to the target's lost health, so it's basically an execute. It will kill them at low health. When the enemy is defeated, it will decrease the skill cooldown of Descent by 1 turn, and the skill cannot trigger a dual attack. So yeah, again, you will use Descent as an opener, push them up, somebody else will go, deal damage to the enemy, Closer will proc, you'll rush to the front, you'll use Demolition to kill them, which will then lower the cooldown of Descent so that you can do it again and reset the cycle. Feels honestly like a cleave character. So that's pretty much the best I can think of. I just because he's the Scorpio Thief, I just can't imagine him being on counter set, built as a bruiser. So I feel like the only real way you can go with this character is just to be a fast opener. He just seems like an accessory for cleave players, but I don't even think he is any better than Operator Cigarette. I feel like Operator Cigarette does more for you than Closer Charles does. So yeah, I'm not really sure. Again, underwhelmed because I just don't know where you'd want him. He just seems like a cleave character, and it just feels like cleave already has better options. So yeah, that's just my honest opinion. I think it is best for us all to wait and see how other players use him, how he pans out, and go from there. So yeah, that's going to be it for the video. I know it's running long, but there you go. That's my thoughts on literally everything that was shown today in the patch. Best of luck to you all in your ReZero rolls tomorrow. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. And I'll catch you all later. Bye-bye now.